Last winter I lived on my boat, but the winter before I did something even more unusual and a little bit crazy. I lived the whole winter with no heating in my house. And I live in Norway, so it gets pretty cold here during the winter. So you may be wondering, why would I ever put myself in such a crazy, uncomfortable and miserable situation? Well, I had a few different reasons for it. So it all started with my house burning down. Luckily I didn't own the house, I was just renting there. So that left me with the option of either finding a new place to rent or live in a little cabin with no heating at all. And of course I went for the second option. So still, why would I do that? Well, I really like to expand my comfort zone and to try new stuff, to see how far I can go, and to get comfortable with the uncomfortable. So by doing this, I thought I was going to get a lot more resistant to cold, for example. And it would also give me so much freedom to know that I could actually pull this off. If I had to, I could just live the whole winter with no heating. In case of an emergency, I would be fine. As long as I had a warm enough sleeping bag and enough blankets, I would be completely fine. So I really wanted to test this out and see if it actually would work. And I thought, well, if it doesn't work, I can always just look for a place later and find another place to live inside somewhere. So my strategy was as follows. I lived in this cabin, but I didn't really spend much time there during the day. I would mostly sleep there, and I would cook food there and eat dinner. But during the rest of the day I would either be at work or I would have access to the university. So I would be able to sit at the university and use the internet and do whatever I wanted. If it's really cold, if it's minus 10 degrees Celsius, and you're sitting in a chair for more than 1 hour, you're gonna get really cold. And the only thing you can do to warm up is go lay in bed or move. So yeah, it's not really sustainable if you stay inside the whole day just sitting, and then you have to go in bed and warm up, and then you have to go jump around and warm up. But it worked really well, just by being there maybe 3 hours every day and sleeping there, but not being there the whole day. Mostly spending time with friends or at university or working or whatever. The biggest, most important thing to do when you have no heating is to have a really, really warm bed. Experiment! Winter without heating. Challenge. Cold resistance. Good night. Make sure that you have plenty of blankets, plenty of sleeping bags. So what I would do is have 2 sleeping bags inside of each other, and then I would have 2 woolen blankets over the sleeping bags, and then I would have another synthetic blanket on top. And that way, even if the temperature went down to minus 20 degrees, I was completely fine. I wasn't really cold at all in the bed. In the morning, it's not very pleasant to get out of bed and wake up because it's cold in the room. And another thing I did was to put the inside of a tent, so not the waterproof layer, but just the inside part, on my bed. So I would be sleeping inside of the inner part of a tent on my bed, which definitely helped to keep just the air around me a little bit warmer than in the rest of the room. So the biggest issue I found is condensation, and especially condensation in the bed. So what happens is when warm air gets cold, when it meets cold air, it can hold less moisture because colder air can hold less moisture, which means that where the warm air meets the cold air, moisture is gonna condensate from the air. And in this case, the top blanket, the blanket on top, would get pretty wet every night from condensation. And I couldn't really do anything about this. So what I found out is to have 3 different top blankets and then switch them out every night. So you only have 1 every night, and then the other 2 are hanging, drying somewhere else. Another issue was the water freezing. So during the night, if I had any drinking water, in the morning it would freeze and I would not be able to drink anything or use it for cooking. So I basically had to bring fresh water every day when it was really cold, because I just couldn't keep using it for more than 1 day. And it's also quite unpleasant drinking icy water all the time. So another difficult thing with this challenge was the social stigma. Because when I told people about what I was doing, they were like, "What? You're living the whole winter with no heating? You're gonna freeze to death. What are you doing?" Yeah, of course they didn't really understand why the hell I would put myself through such misery. But I think after a few months, when I showed them that it actually worked and that I was still alive and happy, then I think they understood it a little better and they were maybe even a little bit impressed by it. So the big question is probably, was I freezing? Well, actually, not really. Because I was always making sure that if I started to get too cold, I would go in my bed to warm up. So I never really took any risks. So I'm sure some people thought I was being really stupid and reckless living with no winter. And that I was gonna lose my toes and I was gonna potentially die from hypothermia. But throughout the whole challenge I was always being very careful and I always had full control of my body temperature. And I always made sure that if I got too cold, I would go in bed and warm up. I've been much colder just walking like outside on a normal day than I ever was living with no heating the whole winter. And also I was like, it was really fun. I really enjoyed doing this. Like, strangely enough, I wasn't miserable. I wasn't like annoyed with myself for starting this. Like the whole time I was like, yes, I can do this. It works. So that kind of kept me going, and I never felt like, oh no, I hope it's gonna be over soon. But that might be because I really like to challenge myself. I think a lot of people probably wouldn't like it that much, to be honest. Well, I hope you got something out of this video. And if you like this kind of stuff, feel free to check out the other videos on my channel. I have, for example, a video about living on a boat in the Norwegian winter. I have some videos about rafting expeditions that I did with some friends, and a lot more other stuff. So thanks for watching.